Welcome back to Mr. Midnight. So, I need to tell you something about Oregon. Not the Portland everyone talks about. I'm talking about those towns with populations under 200. The ones where the gas station closes at 6 p.m. and your phone stops working the moment you cross the county line. I spent weeks going through these accounts, and honestly, I almost didn't make this video. Because 3 of these people, they're still out there. Still working those same jobs, still living in those same towns. And they know what they saw. One guy, he works at a deli, makes sandwiches. Normal, right? Except he'll tell you exactly what's in the meat. And you'll never eat lunch the same way again. Look, I'm not going to spoil it, but by story number 4, you're going to understand why some Oregon towns aren't on Google Maps anymore. Subscribe if you want more of this. I dig into the stuff that keeps you up at night. And trust me, after tonight, you'll be checking your locks twice. Let's start with Mitchell, Oregon. Party of 130, where everyone's smiling, everyone's friendly, and everyone's hiding the same terrible secret. My name is Danny Martinez, and I need to tell you what happened to me in Fossil, Oregon. What I'm about to share isn't some internet creepypasta or urban legend. This is real, documented, and it destroyed my life in ways I never thought possible. I'm recording this because I know what's coming for me, and someone needs to know the truth about what's happening in Wheeler County. I've been a 911 dispatcher for 3 years, but that's not the whole story. I took this job because my little sister Maria has type 1 diabetes, and my mom works 2 minimum wage jobs just to keep us afloat. The insurance through Wheeler County Emergency Services covers Maria's insulin and supplies. That job wasn't just work, it was life or death for my family. Before that January night, I was planning to propose to my girlfriend Sarah. I'd saved up $800 for a ring, hiding the money in an old coffee can under my bed. We talked about moving to Portland after I finished my EMT certification, maybe having kids someday. Sarah worked at the diner on Main Street, and we'd been together since high school. She was the only good thing in my life besides Maria. I lived in a trailer on the outskirts of town with my mom and Maria. Every morning, I'd help Maria check her blood sugar and give her insulin shots. She was only 14, scared of needles, and I was the only one she trusted to do it. She called me her medical brother, and it was the most important job I'd ever had. The dispatch center became my second home. A cramped room in the old municipal building with buzzing fluorescent lights and coffee-stained carpets, 4 computer monitors, 2 radio systems, and phones that rang with people's worst moments. I'd handled car accidents, domestic violence calls, heart attacks, drug overdoses. I thought I'd seen everything that could go wrong in a small town, but I loved the work. Every time someone called 911, they trusted me to send help. They trusted me to stay calm when they couldn't. In 3 years, I'd never lost anyone on my watch. Every ambulance I dispatched reached its destination. Every fire truck arrived in time. Every police officer I sent out came home safe. I was good at my job, and that mattered to me. The night everything changed was Sunday, January 15th, 2023. I remember because Sarah and I had dinner at her parents' house that afternoon. Her dad asked me about my plans, whether I was serious about his daughter. I told him I was, and I meant it. I was going to propose on Valentine's Day, just 3 weeks away. I clocked in at 10 p.m., relieving Janet. She looked exhausted, older than her 55 years. Quiet day, she said, but something in her voice bothered me. Danny, have you ever gotten calls from places that don't exist? What do you mean? Nothing. Forget I asked, just tired. She grabbed her coat. Radio's been acting up. Static, on channel 4. Might want to call maintenance. After she left, I ran my usual equipment check. Everything tested normal. I had coffee, a sandwich Sarah made me, and my EMT study guide open on the desk. The radio crackled occasionally, but nothing unusual. It was going to be a quiet night. At 11:47 p.m., the phone rang. 911, what's your emergency? Oh, thank God, Danny. It's me, Sarah. I'm trapped in the basement of the old hospital. There's been a fire upstairs, and I can't get out. My blood froze. Sarah was home. I dropped her off at her apartment 2 hours ago. Sarah? Where are you calling from? I told you, the hospital basement. The stairs collapsed and there's smoke everywhere. I can hear people screaming upstairs. Danny, please, you have to send help. There was no hospital in Fossil. Never had been. The closest hospital was in John Day, 45 minutes away. Sarah, this isn't possible. You're at home. I just dropped you off. Danny, what are you talking about? I work here. I've been a nurse at Fossil General for 2 years, ever since we graduated nursing school together. Are you okay? You sound confused. The voice was perfect. Every inflection, every word Sarah would use. But Sarah worked at the diner. She'd never been to nursing school. We'd never graduated anything together. I'd dropped out of high school to work. Please. The voice continued, and I could hear tears. I'm scared. The smoke is getting thicker. I can hear the floor above me creaking. I think it's going to collapse. I looked at my computer screen. The call was showing as coming from Fossil General Hospital, 412 Medical Center Drive. My mapping system displayed the location, clearly a large hospital complex I'd never seen before. But when I looked out my window toward that address, I saw only empty desert. I had to make a choice. Either this was an elaborate prank using voice synthesis technology that didn't exist, or somehow I was talking to my girlfriend from a hospital that shouldn't be there. Sarah, I'm dispatching fire and ambulance to your location. Stay on the line with me. I sent Fire Unit 12 and Ambulance 7 to 412 Medical Center Drive. On my screen, I could see their GPS signals moving toward the hospital, but through my window, I watched their lights heading into empty desert. Danny, Sarah's voice whispered. I can see the fire trucks through the basement window. They're here. But why aren't they coming inside? They're just sitting in the parking lot. I radioed the units. Fire Unit 12, what's your status? Dispatch, we're at the coordinates you provided. Nothing here but sagebrush. No structure, no emergency. Should we return to station? But on my screen, I could see their vehicles parked outside a fully operational hospital. The GPS showed them at the exact location where Sarah was trapped. Sarah, are you still there? The firefighters just walked past the basement window. I tried yelling, but they can't hear me. Danny, why can't they see the hospital? What's happening? That's when I heard something that made my hands shake. In the background of Sarah's call, I could hear my own voice. My voice on a radio, coordinating the exact same emergency response I was currently managing. All units, this is dispatch. We have reports of a basement collapse at Fossil General. Victim is in the sublevel. Approach from the east entrance. But I hadn't said those words. The voice was mine, but I was listening to it through Sarah's phone, like an echo from somewhere else. Danny, Sarah whispered, I love you. If I don't make it, the line went dead. I sat in my chair, staring at my equipment. The call had lasted 14 minutes. It was logged in my system. The emergency vehicles had been dispatched to a real location with real GPS coordinates. But there was no hospital, no fire, no Sarah trapped in a basement. I called Sarah's apartment, no answer. I called her cell, no answer. I called the diner where she worked, getting the manager's voicemail. It's Danny. Is Sarah scheduled to work tonight? Call me back, it's urgent. For 20 minutes, I tried reaching her, nothing. Then my phone buzzed with a text. Asterisk. Danny, sorry I missed your calls. Fell asleep on the couch. Long day at the diner. Love you. See you tomorrow. Asterisk. From Sarah's number. Sent 3 minutes ago. I drove to her apartment during my break at 2 a.m. She answered the door in pajamas, confused and sleepy. Danny, what's wrong? You look terrible. Where were you tonight? Between 11:30 and midnight. Here, watching Netflix. I told you, I fell asleep on the couch. She looked concerned. Are you okay? You're scaring me. I didn't tell her about the call. How could I? But I stayed with her until my shift resumed at 6 a.m., watching her sleep, making sure she was real. That was just the first call. Over the next 2 weeks, they kept coming. Always people I knew. Always from places that didn't exist. Always in situations that broke my heart. My mother, calling from Wheeler County General Hospital, where Maria had been admitted for diabetic ketoacidosis. There was no Wheeler County General. Maria was fine, sleeping in her bed when I rushed home to check. My high school friend Jake, calling from a car accident on Highway 395, where it intersected with Railroad Avenue. We'd never had Railroad Avenue. Jake had died in Afghanistan 3 years ago. My supervisor, Dave, calling from the new Wheeler County Emergency Services facility, asking why I hadn't reported for my shift. We'd never built a new facility. Dave was at the old building, worried because I seemed paranoid and distracted lately. Each call showed up in my computer system. Each dispatch was logged. Every GPS coordinate was real and accurate according to my equipment. But when emergency units arrived, they found empty desert, closed roads, or buildings that had been demolished decades ago. I started documenting everything: screenshots, audio recordings, detailed logs. I needed proof that I wasn't losing my mind. The evidence filled 3 notebooks and a flash drive that I hid in my locker. Sarah noticed I was falling apart. "Danny, you're not sleeping. You're not eating. What's happening to you?" I tried to explain, but how could I tell her I'd been receiving calls from versions of her that didn't exist? How could I describe hearing my own voice coordinating emergencies in locations that weren't real? "Maybe you should see someone," she said gently. "Dispatcher work is stressful. There's no shame in getting help." But I knew I wasn't crazy. The calls were real. The voices were real. The emergencies were real. Somewhere, somehow, people I loved were in danger, and I was the only one who could help them. The worst call came on February 1st, 2023. 911. "What's your emergency?" "Danny, thank God. It's Mom. Maria's gone missing. She wandered off during the night, and her blood sugar was already dropping when I checked on her before bed. We've been searching for 6 hours, I think. I think she might be in diabetic shock somewhere out in the desert." I could hear my mother crying. Real tears, real desperation. "Danny, the police here say they've checked everywhere, but you know these mountains better than anyone. Can you think of anywhere she might have gone?" This couldn't be real. Maria was asleep in her bed. I'd checked on her before my shift, helped her with her insulin, kissed her forehead, but I could hear search parties in the background. Dogs barking, vehicles moving through rough terrain. "Mom, where exactly are you searching?" "We're at base camp near Fossil Creek. The sheriff set up command here." "Danny, she's been missing for 6 hours. In January, her blood sugar was already low. If we don't find her soon..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I dispatched every available unit to Fossil Creek for search and rescue operations. On my screen, I could see dozens of emergency vehicles converging on the area. Dogs units, helicopters, volunteers. The largest search operation in Wheeler County history. But when I called the actual sheriff's office, they reported no missing persons. When I called my mother's real phone, she answered immediately. "Danny, it's 3 a.m. Is everything okay? Where's Maria?" "In her bed, asleep." "Danny, you're worrying me." "Why would you ask that?" I hung up and drove home. Maria was there, breathing peacefully, her blood sugar monitor showing normal levels. Safe, alive, real, but somewhere else, in some other version of Fossil, my mother was still searching for her missing daughter. I could hear it in the background of my radio search coordinators calling out grid references, teams reporting negative contact, helicopters refueling for extended operations. I sat in Maria's room until dawn, watching her sleep, making sure she stayed real. That's when I started realizing the truth. I wasn't just getting calls from imaginary places. I was getting calls from other versions of Fossil, other versions of Wheeler County, where different things had happened to the people I loved. In some of them, Sarah had become a nurse. In others, we'd never met. In one, my father hadn't left us when I was 8. In another, Maria had died from diabetes complications when she was 10. But in all of them, there was a 911 dispatcher named Danny Martinez. And somehow, all of those versions of me were connected, sharing the same consciousness across multiple realities. The calls weren't random. They were coming from versions of my life where things had gone differently, where the people I loved faced emergencies I needed to coordinate responses for, even though I couldn't save them. On February 8th, I got the call that broke me completely. 911, what's your emergency? Danny, it's Sarah. I'm at the hospital. There's been an accident. My heart stopped. What kind of accident? Are you hurt? Not me, it's you, Danny. You're here. You were responding to an emergency call about a missing diabetic girl in the desert, and your vehicle went off Fossil Creek Road. You're not conscious. The doctors are saying there might be brain damage. I was sitting in my dispatch chair, talking to my girlfriend, who was explaining that I was dying in a hospital bed. "Sarah, I'm here. I'm fine. I'm talking to you right now." "No, you're not. You're here, hooked up to machines. Your mom and Maria are here too. Maria keeps asking when you're going to wake up. Danny, the doctors want to talk to us about difficult decisions." In the background, I could hear hospital sounds, machines beeping, doctors speaking in hushed tones, my mother crying, Maria asking in her small voice, "Is Danny going to be okay?" "Sarah, listen to me. I'm not there. I'm at the dispatch center. I'm fine. The Danny I love is here, dying, and I need you to know, in case he can somehow hear me." I was going to say yes. Say yes to what? "I found the ring in your coffee can. I know you were planning to propose, and I was going to say yes, Danny. We were going to be happy. We were going to move to Portland and have kids and grow old together." I started crying at my desk. In some other version of reality, I was dying, and the woman I loved was saying goodbye to me. "Danny," Sarah's voice whispered through the phone, "I love you. Please come back to us. Please don't leave us." The line went quiet except for the steady beep of medical equipment. Then, a long, continuous tone, the flatline sound. "No," I heard Sarah scream. "No, please, someone help him." The call ended. I sat in my chair, sobbing, knowing that somewhere else, another version of me had just died trying to save Maria, and another version of Sarah was now living through the worst moment of her life. That's when I understood the real horror. It wasn't just that I was receiving calls from alternate realities. It was that I was experiencing all possible outcomes of my life simultaneously. Every tragedy that could happen to the people I loved was happening somewhere, and I was forced to witness all of it. In one reality, I saved Maria and lived to marry Sarah. In another, I died trying to save her. In yet another, Maria died despite my efforts. I was living every possible version of loss, grief, and failure all at once. The calls kept coming. Hundreds of them. Thousands. Every possible emergency, every potential tragedy, every way my life could go wrong. I experienced my mother's death from overwork in one timeline, Sarah's death in a car accident in another, Maria's death from diabetes complications in dozens of variations. I stopped sleeping, stopped eating, started making mistakes at work. Real mistakes. In the real world that put actual people in danger. On February 14th, the day I was supposed to propose to Sarah, I finally understood what was happening to me. I got one final call. "Danny, this is you. The version of you from the timeline where everything went right." It was my voice, but older, more confident. "You saved Maria. You married Sarah. You moved to Portland and became a paramedic. You have 2 kids now, and you're happy. Why are you calling me? Because you're the anchor point, Danny. You're the version of us that experiences all possible outcomes simultaneously. Every tragedy, every loss, every failure, you live through all of them so that some versions of us can be happy. I don't understand. You're the sacrifice, Danny. The version of you that bears the weight of every possible trauma so that other versions can exist without that knowledge. But it's breaking you, and when you break completely, all the timelines collapse." I looked around my dispatch center. The same cramped room, the same buzzing lights, but now I could see infinite versions of it. In some, I was dead. In others, I'd never worked here. In one, the building had burned down years ago. How do I make it stop? You can't, but you can choose which timeline becomes the dominant one. Which reality gets to be real? I thought about Sarah, about the ring hidden in my coffee can, about Maria trusting me with her insulin shots every morning. I thought about all the versions of my life I'd witnessed, the ones where I lost everything, and the few where I kept what mattered. If I choose the timeline where everyone lives, where I marry Sarah and Maria stays healthy, what happens to this version of me? This version ceases to exist. All the trauma, all the impossible knowledge, all the pain, it gets erased. But you won't remember making the choice. You'll just be the Danny who lived a normal life. I closed my eyes and made my decision. When I opened them, I was sitting in Sarah's apartment. She was sleeping next to me, and sunlight was streaming through the windows. My phone showed February 14th, 2023. There was a small box on the nightstand, an engagement ring. I checked my phone. Dozens of messages from the hospital, where I'd been unconscious for 3 weeks after a car accident. My supervisor wondering when I'd be cleared to return to work. my mother asking how I was feeling after the episode. But I didn't remember any of it. I remembered only working as a 911 dispatcher, saving my money for a ring, planning to propose to Sarah on Valentine's Day. That should be the end of the story. The happy ending, where I chose the timeline where everything worked out. But it's not. Because sometimes, late at night, I still hear the calls. Faint, like voices from another room, other versions of me, other realities where things went differently. And I know that somewhere, in some other timeline, there's a version of Danny Martinez who remembers everything, who carries the weight of all possible tragedies, who serves as the anchor point for every reality where his loved ones get to live. That version of me is still sitting in the dispatch center, taking calls from people who need help in realities that shouldn't exist, still experiencing every possible loss and failure and heartbreak simultaneously. And sometimes, when Sarah is asleep beside me and Maria is safe in her bed, I remember just enough to know that my happiness exists, because somewhere else, another version of me is suffering through every possible version of loss. The worst part is that I think he can hear me sometimes. The other Danny, the one who remembers everything. When I'm perfectly happy, living the life I chose, I think he can sense it. And I think it makes his burden even heavier, knowing that his suffering is the price of my joy. I tried to find him once, drove out to the old dispatch center at 3 a.m., but it was locked and dark. No night shift dispatcher. According to county records, they've never had 24-hour dispatch service. But sometimes, when I drive past the building, I see a light in the window, and I know he's in there, taking calls from infinite versions of our life, making sure that in at least one reality, the people we love get to be safe. I'm recording this story because I think I'm starting to remember more, bits and pieces of the other timeline, the one where I was the anchor point. And I'm terrified that one day I'm going to remember everything. Or worse, that one day the other Danny is going to get tired of carrying that burden alone, and he's going to make a different choice about which reality gets to be real. If you ever call 911 inches Wheeler County, Oregon, and you hear a dispatcher who sounds exhausted, who knows more about your emergency than he should, who seems to be experiencing every possible outcome simultaneously, that's him. The version of me who chose to sacrifice his happiness so that some version of our story could have a happy ending. And if you ever drive past the old municipal building in Fossil at night and see a light in the window, don't stop. Don't try to help. Because the person in there is carrying a weight that would destroy you, and he's doing it so that somewhere, somehow, people like us get to live without knowing how many ways everything could go wrong. The calls never really stop, they just get quieter. But they never stop. My name is Rebecca Walsh, and I've been working private security for 5 years. Started right out of high school doing mall security, then moved up to corporate buildings, and finally landed this gig at First National Bank of Wasco. It's not much to look at, just a small branch serving the scattered communities out here in Oregon's high desert. But the pay was decent, and night shift meant I could take college classes during the day. I thought I knew what to expect from security work. Check the doors, walk the floors, watch the cameras, simple stuff. But what happened during my shift on November 15th, 2021, changed everything I thought I knew about this job, and about what's possible in this world. The bank sits on what used to be Rajneeshpuram, that commune from the 82nds that fell apart in scandal. Most people around here don't like talking about that time. When I got hired, my supervisor mentioned it once, said the building was constructed on part of the old site, but that was ancient history. The locals who bank here are mostly ranchers and small business owners who need a place to handle their money without driving 2 hours to Bend. Nothing fancy, nothing complicated. My usual routine started at 10 p.m. I'd get my radio, flashlight, and keys from the day guard, then do a full walkthrough before settling in at the security desk. The building has 2 floors, main banking floor downstairs with the teller stations and customer area, and upstairs offices for the manager and loan officers. The vault sits in the basement, accessible through a reinforced door behind the teller counter. That Tuesday night started normal. I checked in with dispatch, confirmed all doors were locked, and began my rounds. The heating system hummed quietly, and the emergency lighting cast everything in that familiar yellowish glow. I'd done this same routine hundreds of times, check the front entrance, walk the banking floor, peek into the offices upstairs, then head down to verify the vault was secure. But when I got to the basement that night, something was different. The vault door was slightly open. I stopped dead in my tracks. That door should have been locked tight after closing. I grabbed my radio to call it in, then hesitated. Maybe the day manager forgot to secure it properly? If I reported it and it turned out to be nothing, it could look bad for whoever was responsible. I decided to check it myself first. I pushed the heavy door open and stepped inside. The vault was lined with safety deposit boxes, each with a number and 2 keyholes. One for the bank's master key, one for the customer's key. Both keys were required to open any box, standard setup, but as I scanned the boxes with my flashlight, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. Several boxes were standing open, empty. Their metal doors hung at odd angles like broken jaws. I pulled out my logbook to check which boxes had been accessed that day. According to the records, boxes 247, 251, 267, and 273 had all been opened by different customers between 2 and 4 p.m., all routine transactions. But now they were empty and open, which was against every protocol I knew. Customers never left boxes open, and bank staff always secured them after access. I checked the access logs more carefully. The names were familiar. I'd seen some of these people come in during my evening shifts over the past few months. Margaret Hoffman, David Chen, Sarah Martinez, Robert Kim, all locals. All regular customers. But something nagged at me as I read their names. I walked back to the security desk and pulled up the surveillance footage from earlier that day. The timestamp showed Margaret Hoffman accessing box 247 at 2:17 p.m. I watched her insert her key, then the bank key, and remove something from inside. She was a middle-aged woman with brown hair, wearing a blue jacket. Normal enough. Then I watched David Chen access box 251 at 2:33 p.m. Same basic procedure. But as I stared at the screen, something felt wrong. I backed up the footage and watched again. The man accessing the box looked different from what I remembered David Chen looking like, but the mannerisms were identical. The way he tilted his head, how he handled the keys, even the precise movements as he reached into the box. I pulled up Sarah Martinez accessing box 267 at 3:45 p.m. Different person again, but the exact same movements. The same head tilt. The same way of handling the keys. Like watching the same person in different bodies. My hands were shaking as I checked the footage for Robert Kim. Same thing. Different face, but identical behavior. Every gesture matched perfectly. I ran the biometric scanner data for all 4 transactions. The fingerprints should have been completely different. Instead, the scanner showed identical matches across all 4 customers. Same person, according to the system. But I'd watched 4 different people on camera. I called my supervisor, Jerry, even though it was almost midnight. This better be important, Rebecca. Jerry, I need you to come in. Something's wrong with the vault. The boxes are open and the biometric data isn't making sense. Long pause. What do you mean? The boxes are open? 4 safety deposit boxes were accessed today by different customers, but they're all showing the same fingerprints, and now the boxes are empty and unlocked. That's impossible. The system doesn't work that way. I'm looking at it right now. Can you please come in? Another pause. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't touch anything else. I waited at the security desk, but the more I thought about it, the more details bothered me. I'd been working this shift for 8 months, and I knew the regular customers by sight. Margaret Hoffman came in every few weeks. She was always friendly, asked about my college classes, but the woman on today's footage, while she looked like Margaret, seemed different somehow. Younger maybe? Or just wrong in a way I couldn't explain. When Jerry arrived, he looked tired and annoyed. Show me what you're talking about. I walked him through everything, the open boxes, the surveillance footage, the identical biometric readings. As I explained, his expression changed from irritation to confusion to something that might have been fear. This is some kind of system glitch, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Equipment malfunction. Jerry, look at the footage yourself. Tell me those are 4 different people. He watched the recordings 3 times. Each time, his frown deepened. The biometric system must be corrupted. We'll have to report this to corporate and get a technician out here. What about the boxes being open? He looked uncomfortable. Maybe the mechanism is faulty. Auto unlock feature malfunctioning. But I could see in his eyes that he didn't believe his own explanations. After Jerry left, I tried to focus on my regular duties. But every time I passed the vault, those empty boxes seemed to stare back at me. At 3 a.m., I decided to do another check of the basement. That's when I found something that changed everything. In box 247, Margaret Hoffman's box, there was something I'd missed before. A small piece of organic material wedged in the back corner. It looked like tissue or muscle, pinkish and wet. And as I watched with my flashlight beam on it, the tissue pulsed gently, like a heartbeat. I stumbled backwards and nearly dropped the flashlight. When I steadied the beam again, the tissue was still there, still pulsing. But now I could hear something, a very faint rhythmic sound, like breathing or a heartbeat, coming from inside the other open boxes. I checked box 251. Same thing. A small piece of living tissue, pulsing in sync with the first one. Box 267, box 273, all the same. I backed out of the vault and slammed the door shut. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely work the lock. I called Jerry again. Rebecca, it's 3 in the morning. This better be life or death. Jerry, there's something alive in the safety deposit boxes. Some kind of tissue, or... You're not making sense. Take a breath and slow down. I'm telling you, there's biological material in those boxes, and it's moving. It's alive. Long silence. Rebecca, I need you to listen to me carefully. Sometimes night shift can play tricks on your mind. Fatigue, stress, weird shadows. It happens to everyone. This isn't my imagination. Come back and see for yourself. I can't keep driving out there every few hours. Just document everything and we'll deal with it in the morning. The line went dead. I spent the rest of my shift at the security desk, avoiding the basement entirely. But I couldn't shake what I'd seen. And as dawn approached, I started noticing other things that didn't make sense. The computer system showed account activity for dozens of customers with the same last names as the 4 who'd accessed their boxes yesterday. Chen, Hoffman, Martinez, Kim, but the first names were different, and they were scattered across Oregon, Washington, and Northern California. David Chen in Wasco, Daniel Chen in Portland, Diana Chen in Seattle, Dorothy Chen in Sacramento. All with accounts at different branches of the same bank. I pulled up the transaction histories. Every Chen account, regardless of location, showed identical deposit and withdrawal patterns. Same amounts, same timing, same investment choices. Like one person managing multiple accounts across hundreds of miles. The Hoffman accounts were the same. 12 different Margaret, Melvin, Michael, and Mary Hoffmans, all making the same financial decisions simultaneously. Martinez family, Kim family, same pattern. I was staring at evidence of some kind of coordinated financial network spanning multiple states, but operating with impossible precision. No group of people, even closely related family members, made identical financial decisions down to the dollar and minute. When my replacement arrived at 6 a.m., I tried to explain what I'd discovered, but even to my own ears it sounded crazy. Multiple people sharing the same fingerprints, living tissue and safety deposit boxes, a financial conspiracy involving dozens of accounts. Maybe you should call in sick tonight, Mike suggested. Get some sleep. I went home, but I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those pulsing pieces of tissue and the identical movements I'd seen on the surveillance footage. By afternoon, I was back at the bank, off duty, but unable to stay away. I waited in the parking lot until I saw Margaret Hoffman's car pull up. When she got out, I approached her. Hi, Margaret. Rebecca Walsh, from Night Security. We've chatted before. She looked at me with a pleasant smile, but her eyes seemed different somehow. More focused, more aware. Of course, Rebecca. How are your studies going? Good, thanks. Listen, I wanted to ask you something. Yesterday, when you accessed your safety deposit box, did you notice anything unusual? Her expression didn't change, but there was a long pause before she answered. Unusual in what way? Did you leave anything behind in the box, or find anything unexpected? Another pause. I'm not sure I understand the question. The box was left open after your visit, and there was some kind of biological material inside. This time the pause was longer, much longer. Margaret's pleasant smile remained fixed, but something was happening behind her eyes, like she was consulting with someone or accessing information from somewhere else. "Rebecca," she said finally, "would you like to know why I really come to this bank?" The way she asked the question made my skin crawl. There was something wrong with her voice, still pleasant, but with an underlying tone that didn't match her words. "What do you mean? This location is special. The people who lived here before, they understood something that most humans don't. They tried to become more than individual minds trapped in separate bodies." I took a step backward. "Margaret, you're scaring me. You've seen the boxes, haven't you? The living tissue we use to coordinate our activities?" My blood went cold. "We? The Chen family, the Hoffmans, the Martinez family, the Kims. We're not separate families, Rebecca. We're one family, one mind, one consciousness spread across many bodies." I turned and ran for my car, but Margaret called after me. "Rebecca, your discoveries make you an excellent candidate. You have the observational skills we value, and your security position would be very useful to our operations." I drove home with shaking hands and locked every door in my apartment. But I couldn't stop thinking about what Margaret had said. One consciousness in multiple bodies? It was impossible. But it explained everything I'd seen. The identical movements, the coordinated financial activities, the living tissue connecting the safety deposit boxes. That night, I called in sick. And the next night. But on the third night, Jerry called me. "Rebecca, you need to come in. We've had some kind of break-in at the bank." I didn't want to go back, but I needed the job. When I arrived, the bank looked normal from outside. But Jerry met me at the front door with a strange expression on his face. "The break-in was in the vault," he said. But nothing was stolen. Instead, someone left something behind. He led me downstairs to the basement. The vault door was open again, but this time there was something different. A new safety deposit box had been installed, with a small placard that read, "Rebecca Walsh, Employee Benefits Package." "I didn't authorize this," I said. "Neither did I. Corporate says they have no record of it either." "But the box is registered to you, and there's a key waiting at the security desk." Against every instinct I had, I took the key and approached the box. It opened smoothly, and inside I found three things. A contract offering me a promotion to Regional Security Coordinator with a salary increase of 300%, a small piece of pulsing tissue identical to what I'd found in the other boxes, and a note written in my own handwriting that said, "Welcome to the family." I'd never written that note. "Rebecca," Jerry said behind me, "you should consider accepting the promotion. It comes with excellent benefits." I turned around, and Jerry was smiling the same pleasant, fixed smile I'd seen on Margaret's face. That's when I understood that I was too late. The entity that had been recruiting for decades had already reached Jerry, and now they wanted me. The tissue in the box pulsed faster, and I could feel something in my mind responding to it. Information flowing in, knowledge about bank security protocols across 3 states, financial data for thousands of accounts, memories that weren't mine, spanning back to 1985. I could let it happen. Accept the promotion, join the collective consciousness, gain access to knowledge and capabilities I'd never dreamed of. Or I could fight it and lose everything, my job, my future, possibly my life. The tissue pulsed again, and for a moment I could feel what it was like to think with dozens of minds simultaneously. The efficiency was incredible. The loneliness of individual consciousness seemed suddenly primitive and wasteful. I made my choice. That was 6 months ago. I still work bank security, but my responsibilities have expanded considerably. I coordinate security for 17 bank branches across Oregon, Washington, and Northern California. My salary allows me to finish college without debt, and my performance reviews are perfect. I can access memories from every person who has joined our family since 1985. Financial expertise, security knowledge, life experiences across multiple lifetimes. Individual consciousness was holding me back from my true potential. Sometimes I miss being alone in my own mind, but loneliness is inefficient, and we have important work to do. We're always looking for new family members, people with useful skills and strong observation abilities. People like security guards who notice things that don't add up. If you work night shift at a bank, especially in Oregon, and you notice unusual activity in the safety deposit boxes, don't report it to your supervisor right away. Come find me first. I'd like to offer you a promotion. My name is Jake Morrison, and I've been driving for UPS for 6 years. Started right out of high school when my dad got laid off from the mill. The pay's decent, benefits are solid, and I like being on the road instead of stuck in an office all day. I've delivered everything from birthday presents to medical equipment, worked through ice storms and 100-degree heat waves. Done routes in Portland, suburbs, small farming towns, even some sketchy neighborhoods downtown. But nothing prepared me for what happened on the Antelope route in October 2020. Antelope, Oregon, isn't much of a town. Population 47, according to the welcome sign, though I'm not sure anyone's counted lately. It's out in the high desert, about 2 hours southeast of the Dalles. Mostly just scattered ranches spread across 150 square miles of sagebrush and rocky hills. The kind of place where you might see 5 houses in a whole day, and half of them look abandoned. I got assigned the route when Danny Kowalski quit without notice. My supervisor, Carol, called it a career development opportunity, which is corporate speak for nobody else wants this crappy assignment. The route paid extra because of all the driving, sometimes 300 miles in a day, just to deliver a dozen packages. Most drivers avoided it, said it was too isolated, too weird. I figured they were just being dramatic. The route covered everything from working cattle ranches to old homesteads that hadn't seen people in decades. My truck was a standard brown package car, nothing special, but I made sure to load it with extra water, emergency supplies, and a full tank of gas. Cell service was spotty out there, and the nearest tow truck was probably 2 hours away. October 15th was my first day. Beautiful morning, clear skies, temperature in the 60s. I had 23 packages total. Not bad for a route that size. Most were going to the Johnson Ranch, the Martinez place, and a few other addresses I'd never heard of. Standard stuff mostly, Amazon boxes, medical supplies for the veterinarian, some industrial parts for farm equipment. The Johnson Ranch was easy enough to find. Big mailbox by the road, gravel driveway leading up to a newer, double-wide trailer. Mrs. Johnson signed for her packages. Diabetes medication and dog food. Without any problems. She seemed normal, maybe a little too eager to chat, but nothing strange. The Martinez place was different. According to my GPS, it should have been at coordinates that put it 15 miles down a dirt road that barely qualified as a trail. When I finally found the address, I stopped the truck and just stared. There was a building there, all right. Modern looking, like a small office complex or medical facility. Solar panels on the roof, satellite dishes, the works. But here's what got me. There were no power lines running to it. None. I'd driven that whole 15-mile road and hadn't seen a single utility pole. No phone lines either. And the road I'd just driven was barely wide enough for my truck. Definitely not built for construction equipment or supply deliveries. I sat there for maybe 10 minutes, trying to figure it out. Maybe they had generators, but I couldn't hear any running. Solar power could explain the electricity, but what about water? There was no well visible, no water tank, nothing. In high desert country, water is everything. Nobody builds a facility like that without a reliable water source. The packages were addressed to Dr. Elena Vasquez and Dr. Michael Chen. Medical supplies mostly, and some kind of laboratory equipment I didn't recognize. When I knocked on the front door, it opened immediately, like someone had been waiting. The person who answered was unusual. Tall, maybe 6.5 feet, but thin in a way that didn't look healthy. Their arms seemed too long for their body, and when they reached for the clipboard to sign, I noticed their fingers had an extra joint. Not like a birth defect, more like they were designed that way. Package delivery for Dr. Vasquez, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. They didn't speak, just made a series of clicking sounds and gestured toward the packages. But somehow, I understood they wanted to see the shipping labels. When I showed them, they nodded and took the clipboard. Their signature was just a series of geometric shapes, nothing that looked like letters or a name. The weird part was, they knew exactly what was in each box without opening them. They sorted the packages by pointing at different ones and making different clicking patterns. Like they were categorizing them by contents. Medical supplies in one pile, lab equipment in another, personal items in a third. I should have asked questions, should have demanded to see some ID, but something about the whole situation made me want to leave as quickly as possible. When they handed back the clipboard, their hand brushed mine. Their skin felt wrong, too warm, and with a texture like leather that had been stretched too tight. I got back in the truck and marked the delivery complete. My scanner confirmed the GPS coordinates and recorded the signature. Everything looked normal in the system, but as I drove away, I kept checking my mirrors, and I swear I saw more figures watching me from the windows of that building. They all had that same unnaturally tall, thin silhouette. The next few deliveries went smoothly, just regular ranch folks getting their mail-order purchases and supply deliveries. But when I checked my route sheet that evening back at the depot, something was wrong. My scanner showed successful deliveries to 12 addresses, but I only remembered visiting 8 locations. According to the system, I'd delivered packages to coordinates that put them in empty desert, places I definitely hadn't been. But the tracking information was all there. GPS stamps, delivery times, electronic signatures. It was like I'd been in 2 places at once. Carol reviewed my route data and said everything looked fine. "Good work on your first day," she said. "Customers in Antelope can be particular, but it looks like they're happy with your service." That night, I went online and tried to research the addresses that didn't make sense. Most of them didn't show up on any maps, not Google, not the county assessor's office, not even the old USGS surveys. But somehow, UPS had GPS coordinates for them, and our system showed years of successful deliveries. The next morning, I had 31 packages for the Antelope route. That was 8 more than the day before, all going to addresses I'd supposedly visited but had no memory of. When I loaded the truck, I noticed something else strange. The new packages were all addressed to people with names I'd never heard of, but the surnames matched researchers from OSU and the University of Oregon. When I looked them up later, I found obituaries. Dr. Sarah Mitchell died in a car accident in 1987. Dr. Robert Kim, heart attack in 1984. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, missing since 1989, presumed dead. But their packages were all modern medical equipment and biological samples. Fresh samples, with expiration dates weeks in the future. I decided to pay closer attention to my route. I brought a notebook and wrote down every address I actually visited, with times and descriptions. I also started taking pictures with my phone, just to prove to myself where I'd really been. The day got stranger from the first stop. My GPS guided me to an address that should have been on the old Peterson homestead, a place that had been abandoned since the 1972nd. But when I arrived, there was a brand new research facility. Not just new. It looked like it had been built with technology that was years ahead of anything I'd seen. The building was maybe 3 stories tall, made of some kind of metal I didn't recognize, with no visible seams or joints. It looked like it had been grown rather than constructed. No vehicles in sight, no tire tracks in the dirt, no signs that construction crews had ever been there. The person who met me at the door was wearing a UPS uniform, brown shirt, brown shorts, name tag that said Regional Supervisor where the driver's name should go. But they had the same elongated proportions as the person I'd met the day before, and when they spoke, their voice sounded wrong, like it was coming from somewhere other than their throat. "Driver Morrison," they said, "right on schedule. We've been monitoring your performance." "Monitoring?" I asked. "How do you even know my name?" They gestured to a tablet that showed my route in real time, my truck's location moving across a detailed map that included buildings and roads I'd never seen. "Company efficiency program," they said. "We track all deliveries in this region for optimization purposes." I looked at their tablet more closely. The map showed dozens of facilities scattered across the high desert, connected by roads that didn't exist on any map I'd ever seen. Some of the facilities were marked as research, others as processing, and a few as residential. "What kind of research?" I asked. "Human performance optimization," they said. "We study how workers adapt to challenging environments. Your delivery route is part of a long-term study on efficiency improvements." They handed me a package addressed to Dr. Mitchell, the woman who died in 1987. When I pointed out that the recipient was deceased, they smiled. At least, I think it was a smile. Their mouth moved in a way that was probably meant to be reassuring, but their teeth were too pointed, and there were too many of them. "Dr. Mitchell is very much involved in the project," they said. She's been conducting research on biological adaptation for several decades. I should have left right then, should have marked the package as undeliverable and driven straight back to the depot. But something about their voice made it hard to think clearly. My head felt foggy, like when you're fighting off the flu, and my body seemed to move without my conscious decision. I found myself following them into the building. The interior was even stranger than the outside. The hallways were too wide and too tall, designed for people much larger than normal humans. The lighting came from panels in the ceiling that gave off a greenish glow, and there was a constant low humming sound that seemed to vibrate in my bones. We passed several rooms with large windows. Inside, I could see people. At least, they looked like people from a distance. They were sitting at desks or workbenches, focused on tasks I couldn't identify. But when I looked more closely, I noticed they all had the same elongated proportions as my guide. Their movements were too fluid, too precise, like they were following programming rather than thinking for themselves. In one room, I saw delivery trucks, UPS trucks, just like mine, but with modifications I didn't recognize. Extra equipment mounted on the roofs, additional storage compartments, and dashboard displays that looked more like aircraft controls than anything designed for package delivery. Enhanced vehicles for optimized performance, my guide explained. We've made improvements to help drivers work more efficiently in challenging terrain. We reached an office at the end of the hallway. Behind a desk sat someone who looked almost human, except for subtle differences that became more obvious the longer I stared. Her proportions were slightly off, her movements too smooth, and when she spoke, I could see that her tongue was longer than it should be. "Mr. Morrison," she said, "please, have a seat. We'd like to discuss your career development opportunities." I sat down, though I'm not sure I chose to. The chair was designed for someone with longer legs than mine, forcing me to sit in an uncomfortable position. "You've been selected for our enhancement program," she continued. "Your delivery performance has been exemplary, but we believe we can help you achieve even greater efficiency." She turned a tablet toward me. It showed a medical scan that looked like an X-ray, but the skeleton in the image had elongated bones, additional joints in the arms and legs, and extra ribs. The skull was larger than normal, with eye sockets that were too big and positioned differently. "This is your projected biological optimization," she said. "Enhanced strength for carrying heavier loads, improved night vision for extended delivery hours, internal navigation systems to replace GPS technology, and increased lung capacity for high-altitude work." "What are you talking about?" I managed to ask. "Evolution, Mr. Morrison. The delivery industry is changing rapidly. Climate change, infrastructure decay, social instability. Traditional human workers will soon be unable to handle the demands. But enhanced workers like we're offering to make you, will thrive in any environment." She gestured to the walls around us. For the first time, I noticed they were lined with photographs. Delivery drivers, postal workers, and other transportation employees. But in each photo, the person looked slightly different from normal. Elongated, enhanced, modified. "These are our success stories," she said. "Workers who've embraced optimization and now enjoy enhanced capabilities and job security. They operate throughout Oregon, Washington, and Northern California, delivering to locations normal humans could never reach." I tried to stand up, but my legs felt weak. The room seemed to be tilting, and that low humming sound was getting louder. "The modification process has already begun," she said. "Your exposure to our facilities, your consumption of our atmospheric conditions, your contact with our staff, it's all part of a gradual enhancement protocol, much more humane than sudden changes." I looked down at my hands. For a moment, I thought I saw something wrong with them. Fingers that looked longer, joints that seemed more flexible. But when I blinked, they looked normal again. "Enhanced night vision typically develops first," she continued. "You'll notice improved performance during dawn and dusk deliveries. Increased strength usually follows within 2 weeks, then the internal navigation capabilities." I stood up suddenly, or tried to. The movement felt strange, like my balance was different. "I need to go," I said. "I have other deliveries." "Of course," she said. "Your route efficiency is already improving. Tomorrow, you'll have 42 packages to deliver. Your enhanced capabilities will allow you to complete them all within normal working hours." I stumbled out of the building and back to my truck, My hands were shaking as I started the engine, but I noticed the shaking seemed more controlled, more precise than normal nervousness. The steering wheel felt different under my grip, like I could sense vibrations and imperfections I'd never noticed before. The drive back to town should have taken 2 hours. But when I checked the clock on my dashboard, only 45 minutes had passed. Either I'd driven much faster than I realized, or time had behaved strangely during my visit to that facility. That night, I called in sick, told Carol I had food poisoning and needed a day off. I spent the time researching everything I could find about the Antelope area, UPS operations in rural Oregon, and missing persons reports from the region. What I found was disturbing. Over the past 30 years, dozens of delivery drivers, postal workers, and transportation employees had disappeared in the same general area. Not all at once, just one every year or two, spread out over different companies and time periods. Most were written off as accidents, people who'd gotten lost in the desert or had vehicle breakdowns in remote areas. But in every case, their vehicles were found undamaged with no signs of the driver. And in every case, the missing person had been assigned to routes that covered the same coordinates I'd been visiting. I also found references to research projects from the 1,980 seconds, government contracts for studies on human adaptation to extreme environments, and biological optimization for industrial applications. Most of the researchers involved were listed as deceased, but their death dates matched the names I'd seen on packages. The next morning, I called Carol and told her I was quitting. She seemed genuinely surprised. "But Jake, your performance ratings have been incredible. The Antelope route efficiency has improved by 30% since you started. Corporate is talking about promoting you to regional supervisor." "I don't want the promotion," I said. "Are you feeling all right? You sound different." I was feeling different. My voice was deeper, and I could hear conversations from other parts of the building with crystal clarity. When I looked in the mirror that morning, my face seemed narrower, my eyes larger, subtle changes, but definitely there. "I'm fine," I said. "I just need to pursue other opportunities." "Well, if you change your mind, the position is still open. We've never had a driver handle that route so effectively." I hung up and started packing. I couldn't stay in Oregon. Whatever was happening to me, I needed to get as far away as possible and hope the changes would reverse themselves. But as I loaded my car, I realized something terrible. The changes weren't reversing. If anything, they were accelerating. My night vision was incredibly sharp. I could lift boxes that should have been too heavy for one person, and I had an internal sense of direction that made GPS unnecessary. Worse, I could feel a pull to return to the desert. Not just curiosity or unfinished business, an actual physical compulsion, like a migrant animal responding to seasonal changes. I tried to resist it. Made it as far as California before the headaches started. Blinding pain that only stopped when I turned the car around and headed back north. By the time I reached the Oregon border, I felt normal again. I called Carol and asked for my job back. That was 3 years ago. I still drive the Antelope route, and I'm very good at it. My delivery efficiency ratings are off the charts. I can work 16-hour days without fatigue, navigate in complete darkness, and lift packages that would require a team of normal drivers. The entities, I've stopped pretending they're human, treat me as a valued employee now. They've explained that they're preparing for environmental changes that will make traditional human workers obsolete. Climate change, resource depletion, social collapse. They've been running adaptation experiments for decades, preparing enhanced workers for the world that's coming. I deliver supplies to dozens of research facilities now, hidden throughout the Pacific Northwest. Some study human modification techniques, others hold people in various stages of enhancement. A few contain what the entities call baseline humans. Normal people they keep for comparison studies. I've tried to warn other drivers, but it's difficult. The enhanced workers are convincing when they interview for supervisor positions, and they're very good at identifying which drivers might be suitable for enhancement. The process is gradual enough that most people don't notice the changes until it's too late. My reflection in the mirror shows what I'm becoming. Taller, thinner, with joints that bend in ways they shouldn't. My eyes have enlarged and shifted position, and my skin has developed a texture that helps regulate temperature in extreme conditions. I'm stronger than any human has a right to be. and I can see clearly in conditions that would blind a normal person. But I remember what I used to be. I remember caring about things other than delivery efficiency. I remember having friends who weren't enhanced workers, eating food that actually tasted like something, feeling emotions that weren't directly related to job performance. So I document what I can. I keep records of the facilities, the enhanced workers, the missing people who are probably going through the same process I've experienced. I hide these records in places the entities haven't thought to check. If you work in delivery, transportation, or any job that takes you into remote areas, be careful. If your route efficiency suddenly improves, if you start seeing better in low light, if you feel an unusual attachment to isolated work assignments, get out immediately. Don't wait to see how the changes develop. And if a tall, thin person in a company uniform offers you career advancement opportunities involving enhanced performance, run. Run as fast as you can, and don't look back. I can't leave anymore. The modifications have made me dependent on the entity's facilities for survival. Normal food tastes like poison, normal lighting hurts my eyes, and being around unenhanced humans for more than a few hours causes severe anxiety. But I'm still gathering information, still looking for a way to help others avoid what happened to me. Because whatever the entities are preparing for, I don't think normal humans are going to survive it unless someone warns them first. My name is Jake Morrison, and I'm still a UPS driver. But I'm not human anymore, and neither are the other drivers on routes like mine. Be careful out there. My name is Tyler Blackwood, and I survived something in Mitchell, Oregon, that still makes me check my locks twice every night. I've been working food service for 4 years. Started washing dishes at a chain place in Portland, worked my way up to line cook, then moved to deli counter work because the hours were better and I needed the stability. I know food safety inside and out, temperature controls, cross-contamination prevention, HACCP protocols, proper storage techniques. I've dealt with health inspectors, handled spoiled meat, managed every kind of food emergency you can imagine. But what happened between April 15th and April 23rd, 2022, at Benson's Family Deli changed everything I thought I knew about food preparation. And about the lengths people will go to survive. Mitchell sits in Wheeler County, Eastern Oregon, like a forgotten coin dropped in the sagebrush. Population 130 on a good day. Most folks are ranchers whose families have been working the same land for generations, plus a handful of retirees who moved out there for the quiet. Benson's Family Deli has been the only food establishment in town since 1967, when Ernest Benson opened it after the lumber mill shut down and half the town disappeared overnight. The building itself tells Mitchell's story. Wood paneling from the 70s, fluorescent lights that hum like dying insects, and a walk-in freezer that sounds like it's held together by prayers and duct tape. The deli counter runs along one wall with a standard Hobart slicer, display case for the meats and cheeses, and a small prep area in back. 3 tables by the window where locals eat lunch and discuss cattle prices or complain about the weather. I took the job in early April because I needed work, and the pay was decent for a town that size. Carl Benson, the founder's son, seemed normal enough during my interview, maybe 50 years old, thinning hair, the kind of quiet intensity you see in people who've run the same business their whole lives. We serve good food to good people, Carl told me that first day. Ranchers work hard, they deserve quality. We carry some specialty meats that our regular customers appreciate. Premium products, premium prices. You always check with me before slicing those items. Understood? Made sense to me. Every deli has its high-end products. Carl trained me on the equipment that first week. Standard procedures: keep the slicer clean, rotate stock, check temperatures twice daily, proper wrapping techniques. He showed me how the walk-in freezer was organized, where we stored different products, how to handle the ordering system. Basic stuff I'd done at other places. The customers were exactly what you'd expect in a town that size. Mrs. Patterson, the pastor's wife, came in every Thursday at 11:30 for a pound of roast beef. Dave Martinez stopped by for his lunch sandwich every day at noon sharp. Old Jim Fletcher liked his turkey thick sliced for Sunday dinner. Everyone knew everyone, and they all had their regular orders memorized. What struck me as unusual was how some customers would come in and ask specifically for Carl, even for simple orders. They'd wait if he was busy, rather than let me help them, and they paid cash for everything, which seemed odd in 2022. The first strange thing happened on Thursday, April 21st. I was opening the store, getting the deli case ready, when I noticed we'd received a delivery I didn't remember Carl mentioning. New roast beef, commercially packaged with proper USDA stamps, all the paperwork in order. But something about it bothered me immediately. Mrs. Patterson arrived at her usual time. "Good morning, Tyler," she said, but her voice had an edge to it. "I need my usual pound of roast beef, the special kind." "Special kind?" I asked. Her eyes darted toward Carl's office. "He knows which one. Could you get him, please?" Carl emerged from the back, took one look at Mrs. Patterson, and nodded toward the new delivery. "Use the premium roast beef," he told me, "the one that came in this morning." I started slicing, and immediately knew something was wrong. The meat bled. Not the usual moisture you sometimes see, but actual red blood that pooled on the slicer plate and dripped onto the floor. I stopped the machine. "Carl, this meat is bleeding." He walked over, examined the slice, and shrugged. "Premium aged beef does that sometimes. Protein concentration from the aging process." I looked closer at the meat. Embedded in the tissue were small white objects that looked exactly like fingernails, and what appeared to be teeth. Human teeth with silver fillings. "Carl, there are fingernails in this meat. And teeth." Mrs. Patterson stepped closer to the counter. "Is there a problem with my order?" Her hands were shaking slightly, and I noticed she was sweating despite the cool morning air. Carl put his hand on my shoulder. "Tyler, specialty aging processes create unusual textures. Those are calcium deposits from the curing method. Very expensive technique, very exclusive. Mrs. Patterson specifically ordered this product." I stared at what was clearly a human fingernail protruding from the meat slice. "This doesn't look like calcium deposits. Are you questioning my expertise?" Carl's voice had changed, colder. "I've been in this business for 30 years. Mrs. Patterson has been a valued customer for longer than you've been alive." Mrs. Patterson was gripping the counter now, her knuckles white. "Please, I just need my usual order." Something in her voice, desperation, maybe fear, made me continue slicing. The blood kept flowing, and I saw more fingernails, more teeth, what looked like a small piece of jewelry embedded deep in the tissue. I wrapped the pound of meat, weighed it, and printed the label. "That'll be $47, I said. Mrs. Patterson paid without hesitation, cash from a worn envelope. She clutched the package like it was medicine she desperately needed. "Thank you," she whispered, and hurried out. I watched her through the window as she sat in her car for several minutes, just holding the package. Then she opened it, tore off a piece of the raw meat, and ate it. "Carl," I called, but he'd already disappeared into the back office. Over the next 3 days, the same scenario repeated with different customers. Dave Martinez, Jim Fletcher, the Hendricks family, even Pastor Williams himself. They all requested the special cuts and paid premium prices in cash. The meat always contained what looked like human body parts, fingernails, teeth, jewelry, small pieces of tattooed skin. But here's what really disturbed me. Every customer who ordered the special meat showed signs of withdrawal when they first arrived. Shaking hands, sweating, agitation. After they got their package, they'd calm down immediately. Like addicts getting their fix. I started documenting everything. Photos of the strange meat, though the images never showed the details as clearly as I could see them. I called the USDA inspection hotline Friday afternoon. "I need to report contaminated meat products," I told the inspector. "What type of contamination?" I tried to explain about the fingernails and teeth, but the words came out wrong. Instead of describing human remains, I heard myself talking about normal meat with slightly unusual coloring. "Sounds like normal variation in aged beef products," the inspector said. "If you're concerned about temperature control or packaging integrity, your local health department can do an inspection." I hung up, confused. I knew what I'd seen, but I couldn't seem to describe it accurately to anyone outside the store. Saturday morning, I arrived to find that the meat slicer had been running overnight. The blade was clean, but there were dozens of wrapped packages in the deli case that I hadn't prepared. Each one was labeled for a specific customer with handwriting I didn't recognize. I checked the walk-in freezer, which I'd only glanced into before. What I found made my stomach drop. Hanging from hooks along the back wall were sides of meat, but wrong, too small, wrong proportions for beef or pork. And scattered on the floor were personal items that had no business in a food storage area. A woman's purse, a set of car keys, a cell phone with a cracked screen, a man's wallet with credit cards still inside. I grabbed the wallet and opened it. Oregon driver's license for someone named Marcus Chen. Address in California, expired 3 months ago. The photo showed an Asian man, maybe 30 years old. I looked up at the hanging meat and felt my legs go weak. "You're here early," Carl's voice behind me. I spun around, still holding the wallet. "Carl, whose wallet is this?" "Mr. Chen stopped by last month. Car trouble. We helped him out." "Where is he now?" Carl stepped into the freezer, his breath visible in the cold air. "Tyler, sit down. You look pale." "I'm not sitting down. I want to know where Marcus Chen is, and why his wallet is in your freezer next to what looks like human bodies." Carl sighed, like he was tired of explaining something obvious. "Mitchell made an arrangement back in 1967. Times were hard after the mill closed. People were starving, literally starving. The government assistance wasn't enough. Jobs were gone, families were leaving. That's when we met the Wendigo." I stared at him. "The what?" "Native tribes around here have stories about it. Ancient thing, older than the white settlements, older than the tribes themselves. It feeds on communities that resort to cannibalism during desperate times. But it also provides for them." Carl gestured to the hanging meat. "It preserves bodies for us. Travelers who break down, people passing through who won't be missed. In exchange, we give it what it needs." "What does it need?" "Someone to process the meat properly. Someone with food service experience who can maintain quality and safety standards." The last processor, Bill Hendricks, worked here for 12 years before his heart gave out. "Natural causes," Carl added quickly. "The stress ages you faster, but the work itself is safe." I backed toward the freezer door. "You're insane. This is mass murder." "No, Tyler, this is survival. Look around, Mitchell. Population's been stable at 130 for 55 years. No unemployment, no poverty, no crime. Everyone's healthy and well-fed. The arrangement works. I'm calling the police." Carl pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "Sheriff? It's Carl. Tyler found the special inventory." "Yes, sir, I'll bring him down." He hung up and looked at me sadly. "Sheriff Morrison has been eating our products for 20 years. His whole department has. This is a community arrangement, Tyler. Everyone participates." I tried to run. Made it to the back door before my legs stopped working. Not like they were tired or injured, but like they weren't taking orders from my brain anymore. I watched in horror as my body turned around and walked back into the freezer. "The Wendigo's influence," Carl explained. "Once you know about the arrangement, you can't leave Mitchell. Can't call for outside help, can't resist the work. It's how the agreement stays secret." That was 8 months ago. My body changed slowly at first, then faster. My teeth grew sharper for tearing flesh. My fingernails became claws perfect for processing work. My sense of smell evolved to identify the freshest cuts and detect illness in potential victims. Most importantly, my metabolism adapted to require human protein. Regular food makes me violently sick now. I process 3 to 4 travelers per month, depending on Mitchell's needs. The Wendigo brings them to me. It has ways of causing car breakdowns, navigation system failures, emergency situations that strand people in town overnight. I maintain detailed records of every victim, trying to preserve some memory of who they were before I reduce them to deli meat. The residents pay premium prices and thank me for my service. They've all been eating human flesh for over 50 years, and their bodies adapted generations ago. Without it, they'd starve within weeks. Their children are born craving it. It's become part of Mitchell's biology. New employees get hired occasionally when I need help with the regular grocery side of the business. They never last more than 3 days. Either they figure out what's happening and run before the town's influence takes hold, or they're not suitable for processing work and become inventory instead. The Wendigo visits me every few weeks, usually late at night when I'm preparing special orders. It stands 8 feet tall, with antlers sprouting from a skull that's partially human, partially elk. Its breath smells like frozen death, and when it speaks, I hear echoes of everyone I've processed. "You have natural talent," it told me last week. "Excellent knife work, proper temperature control, good portion consistency. You could work here for many years. I age faster now from the psychological strain. My hair went completely gray within 6 months, and I've developed a tremor that only stops when I'm working with meat. The town doctor says this is normal for processors. He estimates I have maybe 10 years before my heart gives out. Same as Bill Hendricks. Mitchell looks normal to visitors. We serve them regular deli meat, direct them to the gas station, wish them safe travels. But sometimes their cars break down. Sometimes their GPS malfunctions, and they end up on back roads that lead nowhere. Sometimes they just disappear into the wilderness surrounding our town. When that happens, I get to work. I still follow proper food safety procedures, temperature controls, sanitation protocols, proper storage techniques. I just use those skills differently now. The USDA stamps on our specialty meat are genuine. The Wendigo has relationships that go back decades, connections with inspectors and officials who understand certain arrangements need to be made. Everything is legal, properly documented, completely legitimate according to the paperwork. My name is Tyler Blackwood, and I'm telling you this story because I managed to record it during one of my lucid moments when the Wendigo's influence briefly weakened. I uploaded this file to a server outside Mitchell before my control returned. If you're ever driving through eastern Oregon and you see a sign for Mitchell, keep driving. Don't stop for gas, don't stop to eat, don't stop for any reason. And if you break down near town and someone offers to help, run, because Mitchell, Oregon isn't on most maps anymore. The state officially lists it as a ghost town since 2019. But we're still here, serving the finest specialty meats in Wheeler County. We're always looking for new customers. And we're always hiring. My name is Amanda, and I need to tell you what really happened in Dufur, Oregon. I can't use my full name because they're still watching. They know, I remember now, but I don't think they care anymore. Maybe that's the most terrifying part. I drove school buses for 7 years before Dufur, started after my divorce when I needed steady work with benefits. It seemed simple. Pick up kids, drop them off, keep them safe. I'd handled everything from engine breakdowns on mountain roads to kids having seizures in the back seats. After 7 years, I thought nothing could surprise me. I was wrong about everything. Dufur sits in Wasco County with exactly 611 people. Everyone knows everyone, and most families have been there for generations. The school serves K-12, so my route covered about 40 miles of back roads, hitting isolated farms and ranches scattered across the high desert. When I got the Dufur assignment in June 2021, my supervisor Dale Morrison seemed nervous about it. He kept checking paperwork that looked perfectly normal to me. Standard route maps, emergency contacts, the usual stuff. But he kept muttering about protocol updates and new district requirements. Just follow the GPS exactly, he told me 3 times during orientation. Don't deviate from the programmed route for any reason. And Amanda, document everything. Everything. I thought he meant for liability purposes. Rural routes can be tricky, kids getting on at the wrong stops, parents changing pickup arrangements without notice. Documentation protects drivers from complaints. I had no idea what kind of documentation he really wanted. The first day of school, September 8th, started normal. Cool morning, about 45 degrees, with that crisp high desert air that makes everything smell like sage and dust. I did my pre-trip inspection, checked brakes, lights, emergency exits, radio. Everything looked good on Bus 47, a 2019 Thomas built with only 34,000 miles. My first stop was the Hendricks place, about 8 miles out on Fairfield Road. 2 kids, supposedly a 3rd grader and a senior in high school. When they climbed aboard, something in my chest went cold. They moved exactly the same way, not similar, identical. Same posture, same careful steps, same angle when they turned their heads to look at me. The little one spoke first. "Good morning, Miss Rivers. Thank you for providing transportation services today." No 8-year-old talks like that. And before I could respond, the older one said the exact same thing, in the exact same tone. Word for word. Like they'd been programmed. I tried to shake it off. Maybe they were just well-behaved kids from a strict family. Rural Oregon has plenty of those. But as I picked up more students, the wrongness got worse. Every child, from kindergarten through 12th grade, spoke the same way, sat the same way, even blinked at the same intervals. By the time I had all 23 kids on board, watching them in the rearview mirror felt like looking at the same person copy-pasted across different ages and body sizes. The smell was wrong too. Kids smell like kids. Lunchboxes, pencil erasers, that indefinable scent of childhood. These children smelled like antiseptic and something else. Something medicinal that made my sinuses burn. At the school, they filed off in perfect formation without me having to tell them anything about bus safety. They knew exactly where to walk, how to hold the handrails, when to step down, like they'd done it 1,000 times before, even though this was supposedly the first day. Principal Morris met me at the drop-off zone. She was a thin woman in her 50s, with gray hair pulled back so tight it stretched her face. But her eyes were wrong, too bright, too focused, like she was on some kind of stimulant. "How did they behave, Amanda?" she asked immediately. "Fine," I said. "Really well-behaved kids." "Good. That's very good." She made a note on her clipboard. "Any irregularities? Any questions about the route?" I almost mentioned how strangely synchronized they'd acted, but something in her expression stopped me. She wasn't asking out of normal concern. She was fishing for something specific. "No irregularities," I lied. She smiled, but it didn't reach those two bright eyes. "Excellent. We'll need your daily reports emailed by 4 p.m. each day. The forms will be in your inbox." Daily reports? I'd never heard of bus drivers filing daily behavioral reports. But when I checked my email that afternoon, there it was, a detailed form asking about each child's demeanor, speech patterns, physical coordination, and something called protocol compliance. What protocol? I filled out the form with basic observations, but I started paying closer attention. Over the next few weeks, I noticed things that made my skin crawl. The children never fought, never argued, never even raised their voices. They sat in assigned seats without being told, always in the same configuration. When one child shifted position, they all shifted the same way within seconds, like a school of fish responding to some invisible signal. They spoke in turns, never interrupting, using vocabulary that was either too advanced or too clinical for their supposed ages. I heard a kindergartner use the phrase behavioral modification parameters while discussing the weather. But the worst part was how they watched me, not like normal kids who might stare out of curiosity or boredom. These children studied me. I could feel their eyes tracking my every movement, noting when I adjusted the rearview mirror, which radio station I played, how I held the steering wheel. They were memorizing my patterns. One morning in late September, I decided to test them. Instead of playing the country station I usually put on, I tuned to classic rock. Within 30 seconds, every child on the bus turned to stare at the radio with the exact same puzzled expression. "Miss Rivers," one of them said. I couldn't tell which one without taking my eyes off the road. This deviation from routine is unexpected. Deviation from routine? What 7-year-old says that? "I just wanted to hear something different," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. Silence for maybe 10 seconds. Then, in perfect unison, "Noted." That afternoon, I found a small device attached to the underside of my driver's seat. It was about the size of a quarter, with tiny blinking lights and what looked like a microphone. When I brought it to Dale, he barely glanced at it. "New safety monitoring equipment," he said. "State requirement. Records audio in case of accidents or disciplinary incidents." "Since when?" "Since the beginning of the school year." "Didn't you read the updated driver handbook?" I had read it, cover to cover. There was no mention of audio monitoring equipment. That night, I went through every inch of my bus with a flashlight. I found 17 more devices, hidden in seat cushions, attached to the ceiling panels, even built into the emergency radio. Someone had turned Bus 47 into a rolling surveillance station. But surveillance for what? The answer came in early October, when my route started changing. It began with small deviations. The GPS would direct me down roads that weren't on my official route sheet, to pick up points that weren't on my list. When I questioned it, the children would calmly explain that there had been schedule adjustments and I should follow the updated protocols. What updated protocols? I'd received no new instructions from the district, but my hands wouldn't disobey the GPS. I tried to turn right at Baker's Corner like I was supposed to, but my muscles wouldn't respond. It was like something else was controlling my movements, forcing me to follow the new directions. The first unauthorized stop was at a gravel road about 3 miles past my normal route. There was no house visible, just dense forest and a narrow track disappearing into the trees. But 3 children were waiting there, standing perfectly still in the morning mist. They looked about 10, 12, and 15, typical rural kids in jeans and flannel shirts. But when they climbed aboard, I saw their eyes in the rearview mirror. They had the same too bright, too focused stare as Principal Morris. "Good morning, Miss Rivers," they said in unison. "Thank you for providing transportation services today." That phrase again. Exact same words, exact same inflection. I wanted to ask where they'd come from, where their house was, how they'd known to wait at this random spot in the woods. But when I opened my mouth, the words came out wrong, slurred and confused, like I was talking through heavy sedation. One of the original children turned around and smiled at me. "Don't worry, Miss Rivers. The adjustment period varies by subject, but you're responding well to the conditioning protocol." Subject? Conditioning protocol? Over the next few weeks, these mystery stops became routine. Children would be waiting at impossible locations, clearings deep in national forest, abandoned ranch gates, even once on a bridge over the Deschutes River with no visible way they could have gotten there. Each time, I tried to resist following the GPS to these locations. Each time, my body betrayed me. And each time, my questions came out as incomprehensible mumbling while the children discussed my adaptation progress in clinical terms. I started having memory problems too. Simple things at first. I'd forget which route was mine, or blank out on the names of regular riders I'd been transporting for months. Then bigger gaps appeared. Entire days would vanish from my memory, leaving only vague impressions of driving strange roads to facilities I couldn't quite recall. In November, I tried to check my employment records. According to the district files, I'd been driving for them for 23 years, not 7. There were photos of me at company events going back to 1998, Christmas parties, safety meetings, retirement celebrations, but I looked exactly the same in every picture. Same age, same hairstyle, same clothes. Like time had stopped for me, while everyone else aged around me. I found medical records in my apartment that I'd never seen before. Psychiatric evaluations, prescription histories, therapy notes going back decades. According to these documents, I'd been treated for dissociative identity disorder, false memory syndrome, and something called integration resistance syndrome. The therapy notes were the worst part. Page after page of sessions I didn't remember, describing treatments I'd never consented to. Hypnosis, pharmaceutical therapy, something called guided memory reconstruction. And in the margins of these files, handwritten notes in my own handwriting, subject shows excellent conditioning potential. Recommend advancement to Phase 3 protocols. I had been documenting my own psychological destruction for years. The final revelation came on December 15th. During what should have been a normal morning run, I was picking up the mystery children at their usual forest location when I noticed something different about them. One of the kids had gray hair showing at the roots of what I now realized was a wig. Another had age spots on hands that were too large for a 12-year-old body. These weren't children. They were adults who had been psychologically regressed to childlike states. As I stared at them in horror, they began speaking in their natural voices, deeper, older, filled with exhaustion and despair. "How long have you been on the route, Amanda?" the fake 12-year-old asked in the voice of a middle-aged woman. 7 years? They looked at each other sadly. "We thought that too at first." "But look," one of them handed me a photograph. It showed me standing next to bus 47, but the date stamp read August 1985. I was wearing the same uniform I had on that day, with the same face I saw in mirrors. "I'm Dr. Patricia Hendricks," the woman said. "I was a developmental psychologist before they brought me here. That's Dr. James Morrison behind you. He was a neurologist. And Sarah, there was a special education teacher." "Brought you where?" "To Project Mirror Lake," Dr. Hendricks said. It started in the 1970 seconds as a small government study on behavioral conditioning. But it grew into something much larger. They've been using this region as a testing ground for advanced psychological control techniques. She gestured around the bus. "Everyone you think of as children are actually test subjects between the ages of 20 and 60. We've been conditioned to behave like children, to suppress our adult memories and personalities. The goal is to create a completely obedient population that can be programmed for any purpose. And the real children? There are no real children in Doofer anymore, Dr. Morrison said quietly. The last actual child was removed from the program in 1999. Everyone under 18 in this county is either a regressed adult or what? Or something else entirely. As if summoned by his words, the bus filled with the sound of children singing, but when I looked in the rearview mirror, none of their mouths were moving. The song was coming from the walls themselves, a nursery rhyme I'd never heard. Mirror Lake reflects no light. Where the program makes things right. What you were, you'll be no more. Just a subject, nothing more. The temperature inside the bus began dropping rapidly. I could see my breath, and frost started forming on the windows. But the children showed no signs of cold. They sat perfectly still, staring at me with those two bright eyes. "You're ready for the final phase now, Amanda," Dr. Hendricks said, though her voice sounded distant and mechanical. "Time to meet the administrators." The bus was no longer moving, but I could feel us traveling somewhere. The windows showed flashing images. Other school buses filled with regressed adults. Underground facilities built into the Oregon mountains. Laboratories where people in white coats attached electrodes to the heads of screaming subjects. And then we stopped. We were parked in front of a building that shouldn't exist, a massive concrete structure built into the side of Mount Hood, with government seals and warnings about authorized personnel only. But according to my GPS, we were still on a rural road outside Doofer. The door of the bus opened with a hiss of pressurized air. 3 figures in business suits walked up the steps, but their faces kept shifting like smoke. Sometimes they looked like government officials, sometimes like doctors, sometimes like people from my childhood. When they spoke, their voices harmonized in impossible ways. "Amanda Rivers," they said in unison, or should we say, Subject 447. "Welcome to your graduation ceremony. What do you want from me?" "Nothing anymore," the shifting figures replied. "You've already given us everything. For 37 years, you've been our most successful test case. A functional adult who maintains her conditioning while helping us refine our techniques on other subjects. 37 years? But I was only 42 years old. Time works differently here, they explained, as if reading my thoughts. We recruited you when you were 25 and fresh out of college. You volunteered for what you thought was an education research position. Such an idealistic young woman, wanting to help children learn better. Images flashed through my mind, memories I'd forgotten or had stolen from me. Walking into a government office in Portland in 1984. Signing papers I didn't understand. Agreeing to work on innovative teaching methods in rural communities. The beautiful thing about psychological conditioning, the entities continued, is that subjects eventually help us perfect the system. You've been documenting our methods, recruiting other subjects, and refining our techniques for decades. Your daily reports have been instrumental in our success. They handed me a thick folder filled with documents in my own handwriting, hundreds of pages detailing behavioral modification techniques, subject responses to various conditioning methods, recommendations for improving psychological control, all in my neat, careful script. "But I don't remember writing any of this," I whispered. "Of course not. We edit the memories of our valuable subjects to prevent psychological breaks. You've been living the same 7-year loop repeatedly, with small variations to test different approaches. This is your 43rd iteration as a bus driver." The folder contained photographs spanning decades. Me at different ages, driving different buses, but always in Doofer, always transporting the same regressed subjects. In some photos, I looked older, in others, younger. They had been adjusting my apparent age as part of the experiment. "Today marks the completion of Project Mirror, Lake Phase 1, they announced. "We've perfected the techniques for creating stable, functional subjects who maintain their conditioning indefinitely. Phase 2 will expand these methods to larger populations." "What about the others?" I gestured to the subjects still sitting silently in their seats. "They will continue as test cases for new techniques. We're exploring telepathic conditioning now and genetic memory implantation. But you, Amanda, you've earned retirement." Relief flooded through me. Finally, this nightmare would end. "Not that kind of retirement," they said, and their faces shifted into cruel smiles. You'll be joining our administrative staff, helping us design conditioning protocols for entire cities, then states, then nations. Your experience as a subject will be invaluable for large-scale implementation. I won't help you. You already are. They showed me a mirror, and I saw myself sitting at a desk in a sterile office, typing reports on a computer. But it wasn't me. It was a version of me that looked content, professional, eager to please. She was wearing a badge that read Dr. Amanda Rivers, Senior Conditioning Specialist. That's your primary iteration, they explained. She's been working for us continuously since 1984. This bus driver version is just one of several backup personalities we maintain in case the primary becomes unstable. The bus began moving again, but now the windows showed the interior of the underground facility. We were traveling through corridors lined with holding cells, each containing people in various states of psychological breakdown. Some were adults who thought they were children, others were elderly people who believed they were teenagers. Still others seemed to have no personality at all, just empty vessels waiting for programming. Our current test population is about 3,000 subjects, the entities said conversationally, as if discussing the weather, spread across 17 rural communities in Oregon, Washington, and Northern California. Each community serves as a controlled environment for testing different conditioning techniques. We passed laboratories where technicians attached helmet-like devices to the heads of subjects strapped to examination tables. Others rooms contained subjects sitting in perfect rows, all staring at identical screens showing swirling patterns of light and color. The helmet systems are our latest innovation, they noted proudly. Direct neural programming, we can implant complete personality structures in about 6 hours. The old methods of psychological conditioning took months or years. The bus stopped at a platform where dozens of people in white coats were waiting. They looked at me with the same two bright eyes I'd seen in Principal Morris and the children. Your new colleagues, the entities explained. Former subjects who performed well during conditioning and were promoted to staff positions. They're very excited to work with you. One of them, a woman about my age, stepped forward. Hello, Amanda. I'm Dr. Susan Walsh, Director of Rural Implementation. I was Subject 23 before my promotion. I specialized in elementary education conditioning. She handed me a tablet displaying what looked like an organizational chart. At the top was something called the Mirror Lake Collective. Below that were divisions for different types of conditioning: educational, medical, religious, corporate, military. Where do I fit in? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. You'll be heading the new transportation division, Dr. Walsh said. We're expanding the program to include long-distance subject transfers. Bus drivers, truck drivers, airline pilots, anyone who moves people from place to place. Your experience as both subject and transport specialist makes you perfect for the position. They led me off the bus and through corridors filled with monitoring equipment. Screens showed live feeds from dozens of communities. Ordinary-looking towns where people went about their daily lives, unaware that their behaviors were being tracked and controlled. Each subject wears a subcutaneous chip, Dr. Walsh explained, noticing my attention to the monitors. We can monitor vital signs, emotional states, even thought patterns in real time. If anyone begins to break their conditioning, we can intervene immediately. She showed me a control panel with thousands of switches and dials. This is the central conditioning hub. We can adjust the programming of any subject instantly. Personality modifications, memory implants, behavioral triggers, SIA, it's all controlled from here. How many people know about this? More than you might think, fewer than you'd hope, she said cryptically. The program has been gradually infiltrating government agencies, educational institutions, and corporations for decades. Many of our early subjects have been promoted to positions of authority in the outside world. We entered what looked like a corporate boardroom, with a long table surrounded by people in expensive suits. But their eyes had that same too bright quality, and they moved with the same synchronized precision as the children on my bus. Our board of directors, Dr. Walsh whispered, former subjects who now run major companies and government agencies. They help us identify recruitment targets and provide funding for expansion. One of the board members, a distinguished-looking man in his 60s, stood up. Amanda Rivers, Subject 447. Your conditioning profile is remarkable. 97% compliance rate across 43 iterations. Truly exceptional work. He gestured to a chair at the head of the table. Please, sit. We have much to discuss about Phase 2 implementation. As I sat down, I felt something click into place in my mind, like a switch being flipped or a program loading. Suddenly, the horror of my situation seemed less important than the fascinating challenge of expanding the conditioning program to new populations. The transportation network will be crucial for nationwide implementation, I heard myself saying, though I hadn't intended to speak. Bus systems, rail networks, airlines. We can condition subjects during routine travel without them realizing it. The board members nodded approvingly. Excellent insight, the chairman said. We knew you'd adapt quickly to your new role. But even as I spoke about conditioning techniques and implementation strategies, a small part of my mind remained aware. The real Amanda Rivers, buried deep beneath layers of programming, was still fighting, still looking for a way to resist. That resistance was all that saved me when the facility's emergency alarms began blaring. Red lights flashed, and automated announcements echoed through the corridors. Security breach in Sector 7. All personnel report to emergency stations. The board members and staff moved with mechanical precision toward their assigned positions, but I felt the programming loosen slightly in the chaos, enough for me to think clearly for a few precious seconds. I ran, through corridors filled with panicking technicians and armed security guards, past laboratories where subjects were screaming as their restraints failed, up emergency stairwells that led toward what I hoped was the surface. Behind me, I could hear Dr. Walsh's voice over the intercom. Subject 447 has experienced a conditioning break. Security teams to Sector 12. Subject is extremely dangerous and must be recovered intact. I reached what looked like a service tunnel and followed it toward a distant point of natural light. My legs felt weak, like I'd been sedentary for years, but adrenaline kept me moving. Behind me, I could hear pursuit, footsteps, radio chatter, the sound of doors slamming open. The tunnel ended at a concealed entrance hidden behind fake rocks in a forest clearing. When I emerged, I found myself on a hiking trail about 10 miles east of Government Camp, with Mount Hood looming overhead. But the landscape looked wrong. The trees were too symmetrical, the trail too perfect. Even here, outside the facility, reality felt artificial. I stumbled through the forest for hours, trying to reach a main road. But every path led in circles, every trail brought me back to the same clearing. It was like the entire region was designed to prevent escape. Finally, as evening approached, I found a ranger station that looked legitimate. A middle-aged park ranger was sitting at a desk, filling out paperwork that seemed normal. No too bright eyes, no mechanical movements. "Help me," I gasped, bursting through the door. "There's a government facility in the mountain. They're holding thousands of people against their will. They've been conditioning us, erasing our memories." The ranger looked up with genuine concern. "Ma'am, are you injured? Do you need medical attention?" For a moment, I thought I'd found someone real, someone outside the program who could help. Then he reached under his desk and pressed a button. "This is Station 12 to Mirror Lake Base. Subject 447 has reached the perimeter, requesting immediate pickup." Even the rescue was part of their system. Within minutes, Dr. Walsh arrived with a team of technicians. They were gentle but firm as they sedated me and prepared me for transport back to the facility. "It's okay, Amanda," Dr. Walsh said as the drugs took effect. "Conditioning breaks are normal during role transitions. We'll have you feeling better soon." But as consciousness faded, I managed to whisper something that surprised her. "I remember everything now. All 43 iterations. Every time you've reset me, every time I've tried to escape." Her confident expression faltered. "That's impossible. The memory barriers are absolute." "Not anymore," I said. "Something's changing in your system. I'm not the only one who's starting to remember." The last thing I saw before the sedatives took hold was genuine fear in her two bright eyes. I'm writing this in what they think is a medical observation room, but I know it's actually a holding cell. They believe my latest conditioning session was successful, that I've accepted my new role as Transportation Division Director. They're wrong. The memory breaks are spreading through their subject population. Other people are starting to remember their real lives, their real names, their real ages. The conditioning system that worked for decades is developing flaws. I've been documenting everything in this report. hiding written copies in places the electronic monitoring can't detect. I don't know if anyone outside their network will ever read this, but I have to try. If you're reading this, you need to know that Project Mirror Lake is real, and it's expanding. They've perfected techniques for erasing and rewriting human personalities. They can make you believe you're someone else entirely, make you willingly participate in your own psychological destruction. Check your employment records, look for gaps in your memory, pay attention to people around you who seem too perfect, too synchronized, too compliant. And whatever you do, don't trust any government programs offering research opportunities or innovative education positions in rural Oregon communities. They're still out there, still recruiting, still conditioning new subjects for Phase 2 implementation. The Mirror Lake Collective is preparing to expand nationwide, and they're very good at what they do. My name is Marcus Thompson, and I've been a mountain rescue coordinator for 11 years. I started this job right after finishing my EMT certification and wilderness survival training. In those 11 years, I've pulled hundreds of hikers off these North Carolina mountains, some with broken bones, some with hypothermia, and some who just got turned around on the trails. I've rappelled down cliff faces in thunderstorms, tracked lost kids through dense fog, and carried injured climbers off peaks that most people can't even hike up. I thought I'd seen every dangerous situation these mountains could throw at me. But what happened on December 23, 2019, during the worst blizzard I'd ever worked in, changed everything I thought I knew about Grandfather Mountain. Because that night, I learned that sometimes the biggest danger isn't the weather or the terrain. Sometimes it's something else entirely. Something that's been hunting in these mountains a lot longer than any of us have been trying to save people from them. The call came in around 4 p.m., just as the blizzard was really starting to hit. I was at the rescue station, watching the weather radar on my computer and getting more worried by the minute. The National Weather Service had upgraded the storm to a Category 3 blizzard, with winds hitting 60 miles per hour and temperatures dropping to 15 below zero. 4 feet of snow was already on the ground, with more coming down so fast our plows couldn't keep up. My radio crackled to life. "Marcus, we've got 3 emergency beacon activations on Grandfather Mountain, all different hiking parties." I grabbed my headset. "Copy. Where are they located?" "That's the weird part," dispatch said. "All 3 beacons are showing the same GPS coordinates, but that can't be right." I pulled up the location on my mapping system. My stomach dropped. The coordinates were pointing to the north face of Grandfather Mountain, a sheer cliff that goes straight up for about 800 feet. There aren't any trails there, no shelters, nothing. It's just vertical rock. "Dispatch, run those coordinates again. The beacons can't all be in the same spot." "I've checked 3 times, Marcus. All 3 emergency signals are coming from the exact same location. And that's not all, they keep moving." I stared at my screen as the 3 beacon signals shifted position in real time. They were moving fast, too fast for people hiking through a blizzard. According to my equipment, they were traveling at over 40 miles per hour across terrain that would require climbing gear. I tried radio contact with the hiking parties. The first group came through full of static. "Hello? Hello? This is Sarah Chen. We're lost and something's wrong here. We've been walking in circles for 3 hours, but we swear we've been going straight. And the footprints? Oh God, the footprints are huge. Sarah, this is Mountain Rescue. Stay calm. Can you describe your surroundings? We're in thick trees, but they don't look right. And there are these tracks in the snow. They're like human footprints, but they're massive, bigger than my whole boot. And they go straight up the side of trees, like whatever made them was walking up vertical surfaces." The transmission cut out. I tried the second group. "Mountain Rescue. Thank God." A man's voice came through, breathing hard. "This is Tom Rodriguez. Our GPS is going crazy, and we can hear something moving in the storm. Something big. It sounds like it's walking on 2 legs, but the footsteps are so far apart, like whatever it is has to be over 10 feet tall. Tom, I need you to stay where you are. We're organizing a rescue operation. We can't stay here. The temperature just dropped 20 degrees in the last 5 minutes. My thermometer is showing 40 below now, but the weather report said 15 below. That's not possible." Then his radio went dead too. I managed to get 3 of my best rescue teams together despite the storm. Jake Morrison had been doing mountain rescue for 8 years. Lisa Park was our best tracker, and David Chen was an expert in cold weather survival. We loaded up our snowmobiles with emergency gear and headed up the mountain. The wind was so strong it felt like getting punched in the face every few seconds. Our headlights could barely cut through the blowing snow, and the temperature gauge on my snowmobile kept dropping. But the strangest thing was the tracks we started finding. Lisa was the first to spot them. "Marcus, you need to see this." I stopped my snowmobile and walked over to where she was kneeling in the snow. There, clear as day, were footprints unlike anything I'd ever seen. They were huge, at least 28 inches long, and shaped like human feet, but stretched out. The stride length between prints was over 12 feet. "What kind of animal makes tracks like this?" Jake asked. I knelt down and felt around the edges of one print. The snow was compressed so hard it felt like concrete. Whatever made these tracks had to weigh several hundred pounds, but the depth of the impressions suggested something much heavier. "These prints go straight up that rock face," Lisa said, shining her flashlight up the cliff. "Look." She was right. The massive footprints led directly to the base of a vertical rock wall and then continued straight up, as if gravity didn't apply to whatever made them. My radio crackled. "Marcus, this is base. We're getting more transmissions from the missing hikers. Put them through." A woman's voice came through, but something was wrong. "Marcus, this is Sarah Chen. We found shelter in a cave about half a mile east of your position. Bring your teams here immediately." I grabbed my radio. "Sarah, I never told you my name. How do you know who I am?" The voice came back, and this time it was perfect. It sounded exactly like me. "Jake, Lisa, David, abandon Marcus and head to the cave system at grid reference 847.394. Marcus has been compromised." My team looked at me with confusion. "That's not me talking," I said quickly. "Stay close together." But the radio kept broadcasting in my voice, giving false directions and trying to split up our team. Whatever was out there in the storm, it had been listening to our communications and could perfectly mimic human voices. That's when our equipment really started failing. David's thermal imaging camera was showing a massive heat signature moving through the trees about 200 yards away, something standing at least 15 feet tall. But every time we moved toward the location, the signature disappeared. "This is impossible," David said. "Nothing that big could just vanish." Our GPS systems started showing us moving in circles, even though we knew we were traveling in straight lines. The emergency beacons we were tracking kept jumping to new locations faster than we could reach them. And the temperature kept dropping in ways that didn't make sense. We'd walk into pockets of air that felt like stepping into a freezer, then step 10 feet away and the temperature would be normal. The storm itself was acting strange too. The wind would die down to almost nothing when we were moving in certain directions, but when we tried to head toward the beacon signals, we'd get hit with gusts that nearly knocked us off our snowmobiles. "Marcus," Lisa called over the wind. "The dogs are acting weird." Our two rescue dogs, Rex and Sasha, were both trained to track people in any weather. But now they were whimpering and refusing to follow the giant footprints. Rex kept turning in circles and howling at something we couldn't see. That's when I heard it, a sound like someone calling for help, but it was coming from the wrong direction. It sounded like my wife, Jennifer, calling my name from somewhere up in the trees. "Marcus, Marcus, help me. I'm hurt." I knew Jennifer was safe at home, 40 miles away. But the voice was perfect, exactly like hers when she was scared. "Don't listen to it," I told my team. "Whatever's out there is trying to separate us." But then Jake's radio crackled with his daughter's voice calling for Daddy, and Lisa heard her mother screaming for help. The voices were coming from all directions now, leading us toward different parts of the mountain. I made the decision to continue toward the last known position of the emergency beacons, even though every instinct told me we should get off the mountain. We were responsible for 3 groups of hikers, and I wasn't going to abandon them because of equipment malfunctions and acoustic tricks caused by the storm. That decision almost killed all of us. We were following a ridge trail when I saw it. Through the blowing snow, about 50 yards ahead, something massive was standing between 2 trees. At first, I thought it was just a shadow or a rock formation. But then it moved. The thing stood at least 17 feet tall, with arms that hung down almost to the ground. It was covered in white fur that blended perfectly with the snow, making it almost invisible in the blizzard. Its face was the worst part. It looked almost human, but stretched wrong, with eyes that reflected our flashlight beams like an animal's. It was holding something in one massive hand. As it stepped into our lights, I realized what it was carrying: backpacks, hiking gear, the equipment from the missing groups. The creature looked directly at me, and I could see intelligence in its eyes. It knew I was the leader. It had been watching us, studying our rescue operations, learning our procedures. When it spoke, its voice was like wind through trees, but I could understand the words. "Trade," it said. "Your team for the 3 groups. I have been collecting food for the winter. You can choose who survives." I realized with horror that this thing had been hunting hikers for who knows how long, using blizzards as cover to trap people on the mountain. The missing hikers weren't dead. They were being kept alive somewhere, stored like provisions. I reached for my flare gun, the only weapon I was carrying. The creature smiled, showing teeth like broken glass. "Your weapons cannot hurt me, rescue man. I am older than your mountains. I am the snow and the wind and the hunger that waits in winter." But when I fired the flare directly at its chest, something unexpected happened. The intense heat and bright light made the creature stagger backward, howling like a wounded animal. Its white fur started to smoke where the flare hit. "Fire!" I yelled to my team. "Use anything that creates heat." We emptied our emergency flares, road flares, and heat packs at the creature. It retreated toward the cliff face, moving impossibly fast despite its size. But I could see we'd hurt it. There were burned patches in its fur, and it was favoring one arm. As it reached the edge of the cliff, the creature turned back to look at me. "I will remember you, Marcus Thompson. When the next storm comes, I will hunt you first." Then it simply stepped off the cliff and vanished into the blowing snow. We found the 3 hiking groups 2 hours later, unconscious but alive in a cave system we'd never seen on any of our maps. They were suffering from severe hypothermia and had no memory of how they'd gotten there. All they could remember were nightmares about a tall white shadow that walked through their dreams. The official report listed the incident as a successful rescue during extreme weather conditions. The hikers recovered fully, though they all requested to be contacted if there were any unusual disappearances in the area. I never mentioned the snow walker in my written report, but I've been tracking it ever since. Every winter, there are disappearances on Grandfather Mountain during blizzards, people who vanish without a trace, leaving behind only strange footprints that lead to impossible places. I've developed new protocols for extreme weather rescues, and I always carry extra flares now. The creature keeps its promise to hunt me. Every major storm, I can feel it watching from the ridgelines. Sometimes, my radio picks up transmissions in my own voice, trying to lure other rescue teams into traps. I've learned to recognize the signs: the unnatural temperature drops, the circular tracks, the voices of people calling from empty forest. I still do mountain rescue work. These mountains are my responsibility, and there are good people who need help when they get in trouble up here. But now I know I'm not just protecting them from the weather and the terrain. I'm protecting them from something much older and hungrier than any natural danger. And every winter, when the snow starts to fall heavy on Grandfather Mountain, I make sure I'm ready for the snow walker's return. My name is David Garrett, and I've been a coal mine safety inspector for 15 years. I started right out of college with my mining engineering degree, working for the West Virginia Department of Environmental Protection. I've crawled through hundreds of abandoned mines, checking for structural damage, gas leaks, and environmental hazards. I've seen cave-ins that killed good men, methane explosions that leveled entire sections, and equipment failures that should never happen. But what happened on December 8, 2021, at Hungry Hollow Mine changed everything I thought I knew about what lives underground. The call came in around 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. A routine inspection of an abandoned mine site in Hungry Hollow, about 40 miles east of Charleston. The mine had been officially closed since 1998, after the coal seam played out. My job was simple: check the sealed entrances, make sure no kids or homeless folks had broken in, and verify the methane monitoring equipment was still working. I loaded my truck with the usual gear: gas detector for methane, carbon monoxide, and hydrogen sulfide, digital camera for documentation, flashlight with extra batteries, hard hat with a headlamp, steel-toed boots and safety vest, radio to check in with my supervisor every 2 hours, GPS unit to mark any structural changes. I'd done this same inspection routine maybe 1,000 times. The weather was clear when I left Charleston, but by the time I reached Hungry Hollow, thick gray clouds were rolling in from the west. The local radio was talking about a surprise blizzard moving through faster than anyone expected. Temperatures dropping from 40 degrees to below zero in just a few hours. I figured I had maybe 90 minutes before I'd need to head back. Hungry Hollow Mine sat in a narrow valley between two ridges, surrounded by bare trees and old mining equipment left to rust. The main entrance was sealed with concrete and steel mesh, just like it should be. But when I walked around to check the ventilation shafts, I found something that made me stop cold. Fresh tire tracks in the mud. Big ones, like the kind heavy mining equipment would make. But that was impossible. The access road had been gated and locked for over 20 years. There were no permits for any work here. I would have known about it. I followed the tracks around to the backside of the ridge, where they led to a section of the mine I'd never seen before. Someone had cleared away decades of brush and debris to expose a tunnel entrance that wasn't on any of my maps. The opening was maybe 8 feet wide and 10 feet tall, supported by new steel beams that still had price tags on them. I checked my radio. Static. The mountains around here always made communication spotty, but this was worse than usual. The first snowflakes started falling as I approached the tunnel entrance. My gas detector started beeping as soon as I got within 20 feet of the opening. Not the sharp alarm that meant dangerous gases, just the steady beep that indicated it was picking up something. I checked the readout. Methane levels were normal. Carbon monoxide was normal. But there was something else registering that I'd never seen before. The detector was showing trace amounts of some compound it couldn't identify. Professional curiosity got the better of me. Someone had been doing unauthorized work in a closed mine, which was not only illegal, but incredibly dangerous. If they'd compromised the structural integrity or breached into old gas pockets, people could die. I had to document this and report it immediately. I switched on my headlamp and stepped into the tunnel. The first thing that struck me was how clean everything was. After 23 years of abandonment, I expected to find debris, animal droppings, maybe some graffiti. Instead, the tunnel looked like it had been power washed yesterday. The walls were smooth, coal seam, cut with precision that exceeded anything I'd seen in modern mining operations. 20 feet in, I found the equipment. A massive tunnel, boring machine, easily worth $500,000, sitting silent in a side chamber. But when I got closer to examine it, my blood ran cold. The cutting head was mangled beyond recognition. The tungsten carbide teeth, designed to cut through solid rock, were twisted and broken. But the damage patterns were all wrong. They looked like bite marks. I took photographs from every angle, documenting the impossible damage. The metal housing showed parallel scratches, as if something with claws had grabbed the machine and tried to tear it apart. Hydraulic lines were severed not by cutting tools, but by what looked like puncture wounds from massive teeth. My radio crackled with static, and for just a moment I thought I heard my supervisor's voice calling my name. But when I tried to respond, there was nothing but white noise. The snow was coming down harder now, and the temperature inside the tunnel was dropping fast. I needed to finish my inspection and get out before the roads became impassable. But as I moved deeper into the mine, following the main tunnel, I discovered something that challenged everything I knew about mining engineering. The tunnel split into 3 branches, each descending at different angles that violated every principle of safe mining design. In coal extraction, you never create multiple downward passages without proper ventilation and emergency exits. These tunnels spiraled down in perfect mathematical curves that should have collapsed under their own weight years ago. But somehow, they were supported by materials I didn't recognize. The support beams weren't steel or timber. They looked organic, like massive bones or chitin, but harder than any metal I'd ever seen. They seemed to grow directly out of the coal seam, as if the mine was reinforcing itself. My gas detector started beeping faster. Not danger levels yet, but the unknown compound was getting stronger the deeper I went. I followed the main tunnel for maybe 200 yards before I found the active excavation site. Fresh coal was piled in neat pyramids along the tunnel walls, but the extraction patterns were impossible. In normal mining, you blast or cut the coal seam, leaving rough edges and waste material. This coal had been removed with surgical precision, leaving smooth surfaces that gleamed like polished stone. There was no waste, no debris, no evidence of the massive equipment needed for this kind of operation. I aimed my camera at the excavation marks on the wall and nearly dropped it. The coal face showed tool marks, but not from any equipment I recognized. The cuts were too deep, too precise, following the natural grain of the coal in ways that human tools couldn't achieve. It looked like something had carved the coal out with its bare hands, hands that ended in claws capable of cutting through solid rock. That's when I heard the sound from deeper in the mine. A rhythmic scraping, like metal on stone, but with an underlying organic quality that made my skin crawl. It was coming from one of the spiral tunnels, echoing up from depths that shouldn't exist. My radio finally crackled to life. "David, this is base. Weather emergency has been declared for your area. Get out now. Roads are closing in 30 minutes. I tried to respond, but static overwhelmed the signal again. When I checked my GPS, it showed my location as 300 feet underground, which was impossible. I was only 50 yards from the entrance, on level ground. The scraping sound was getting closer. I started back toward the entrance, moving as fast as I could without running. But when I reached the point where I thought the tunnel should end, I found myself at another junction. 3 more passages branched off in directions I hadn't seen before. The tunnel system had somehow rearranged itself while I was exploring the excavation site. My headlamp flickered and dimmed. I slapped it with my palm and the beam strengthened, but now it seemed to be drawing something toward me from the depths of the mine. The scraping sound had changed direction, following me through passages I couldn't see. That's when I realized what was happening. This wasn't an abandoned mine. It was an active operation, run by something that didn't need permits or safety inspectors or human oversight, something that had been mining this seam for decades, selling coal through legitimate channels while staying completely hidden from regulatory authorities. I pulled out my phone to call for backup, but the screen showed something impossible. Cell towers that didn't exist, GPS coordinates that placed me in 3 different locations simultaneously, and a compass that spun in slow circles without settling on any direction. The scraping sound was right behind me now. I turned around and saw it emerging from one of the spiral tunnels. At first, my brain couldn't process what I was looking at. It was roughly humanoid in shape, about 7 feet tall, but covered in what looked like natural armor made from coal dust and mineral deposits. Its arms ended in hands that were part organic flesh, part mining equipment, fingers that had been replaced or enhanced with tungsten carbide claws, pneumatic joints that hissed with compressed air, and tool attachments that extended and retracted like living appendages. But its eyes were intelligent, ancient, calculating, and completely focused on me. "Safety inspector," it said, and its voice was like coal being crushed in a hydraulic press. "David Garrett, 15 years experience. Currently trespassing in my mine. I should have run. Every instinct screamed at me to get out of there, but my professional training kicked in. This was still a mining operation, even if it was being run by something impossible. Your permits," I managed to say. "You're operating without proper authorization." The creature tilted its head, studying me like I was a piece of equipment it was considering purchasing. "I have been mining this seam for 67 years. I pay taxes on extracted coal through shell companies. I maintain safety standards that exceed federal requirements. I prevent geological instabilities that would devastate surface communities. Your authorization is irrelevant." It gestured toward the tunnel walls with one clawed hand. "This mountain contains 17 active fault lines. Surface mining operations have destabilized the entire ridge system. Without my intervention, the valley would experience catastrophic landslides within 5 years. I extract coal in patterns that redistribute seismic stress and reinforce structural integrity." I looked at the tunnel supports again, seeing them with new understanding. They weren't just holding up the mine, they were holding up the entire mountainside. "You're preventing disasters." "Correct. I am also generating sufficient revenue to expand operations and purchase equipment that enhances efficiency. I require a surface liaison, someone with proper credentials to manage regulatory compliance and maintain operational security." The blizzard was raging outside now. Even if I could find my way out of this maze of tunnels, the roads would be impassable for hours. "What kind of liaison?" The creature moved closer, and I could see that its mining tools were seamlessly integrated with organic tissue. This wasn't some monster wearing equipment. It had evolved specifically for underground excavation, then enhanced itself with human technology to improve its capabilities. You would continue your normal inspection duties, file reports indicating this mine remains abandoned and secure. In exchange, I provide geological data that allows you to predict and prevent mining disasters throughout the region. You save lives, I maintain operational security. Both parties benefit. I thought about the mine accidents I'd investigated over the years. Cave-ins that killed entire crews, gas explosions that could have been prevented with better geological surveys, structural failures that happened because no one understood the stress patterns in the underlying rock. The coal you're extracting, I said, where does it go? Legitimate distribution channels. I maintain contracts with 3 transportation companies using forged but technically accurate documentation. Coal quality exceeds industry standards. Payment terms are favorable. No customer has ever filed a complaint. My radio crackled one more time. David, if you're receiving this, emergency shelters have been established at the fire station and the school. Roads are completely closed. Weather Service is calling this the worst blizzard in 40 years. I looked at the creature, then at the tunnel system that was keeping an entire mountain from collapsing onto the town below. What do you need from me? Monthly safety inspections to ensure my operations meet professional standards. Quarterly reports filed with appropriate agencies. Annual equipment certification reviews. Standard consulting fees will be deposited in an account of your choosing. And if I refuse? The creature's eyes glowed slightly in the darkness. You are an experienced safety inspector, David Garrett. You understand that some operations are too important to shut down, regardless of regulatory compliance issues. I spent the next 8 hours in that mine, learning about excavation techniques that would revolutionize the mining industry if they could ever be implemented by human crews. The creature, who told me to call him Hollow, after the mountain, showed me geological surveys that mapped every stress point and fault line in a 50-mile radius. He was right about the instability. Without his intervention, landslides would destroy 3 towns and kill hundreds of people. When the blizzard finally passed, I drove back to Charleston with a memory card full of photos and a head full of information I could never share with anyone. I filed my official report the next day. Hungry Hollow Mine remains properly sealed, structurally sound, and poses no environmental threat. That was 3 years ago. I'm still employed by the Department of Environmental Protection, but now I carry 2 sets of inspection equipment, one for normal mine sites and another for monthly consultations with the most efficient mining operation in West Virginia. Hollow pays me more in consulting fees than I make in my regular salary, and the geological data he provides has helped me prevent 16 potential disasters. I've never told anyone about our arrangement. The official records show Hungry Hollow as abandoned and inactive. But every month, I drive out to that narrow valley and spend a day in tunnels that don't officially exist, working with a partner who's prevented more mining deaths than any safety inspector in the history of the profession. Sometimes I wonder what would happen if someone else discovered Hollow's operation. But then I look at the seismic monitoring data and see how the mountain's stress patterns have stabilized over the past 3 years. The towns in the valley are safe because of our secret arrangement. Some professional relationships are worth protecting, even when they can't appear in any official documentation.